Good afternoon, everyone. This particular video is going to be all about our electrical and electrical mechanical program here at Southeast Community College, specifically at the Milford location. And we have a friend with us today, Jeff Ives. He is relatively new program chair over that particular program, and he's an expert in all things electrical and all things electrical mechanical. You got this, Jeff. I know you're an expert. So we're very pleased that you're willing to spend a little time with us. Tell us how you're navigating this new virtual world and how are the students adjusting it, and what are some of the things you're doing to try to help them deal with this kind of unusual set of circumstances?
Well, first off, being a very hands-on, our classes are over 50% hands-on equipment. The first thought of doing this, that immediate gut response was, as anybody's exposure to change is, oh, there's no way. But then as we, got through that first initial part and we started looking for, we got to get past this point of we can't, to how are we going to do this and how are we going to best fit the needs of the students. So, immediately we got together and started looking for a few avenues, to try to recreate as much of the hands-on activity, and in areas where we couldn't get to specifically hands-on, what could we give the students that would aid them, in our hopes and dreams, especially coming back next semester, that they would be in a good position to pick up and, we could add a little bit and get ourselves back on track. And so we started looking for ideas. So of course we started with the Zoom classes. So we had actually already, a week before, we had an instructor doing some test Zoom in the classroom, just even in the live face-to-face, where the students were liking the ability that they were doing the Zoom casting and being able to record the lecture and stuff like that. So we had a little bit of running start into getting into this. Next up was, creating, an alternative schedule and making the students aware that classes were still taking places. We were still going to do a lot of synchronous activities, not as many days a week as we did. So it wasn't like we took our 5-day week class and said, we said, no, we're going to limit that down because you're going to have outside activities to facilitate that learning in an online environment. And so myself, I've been shooting and recording instructional videos, and I use the Kaltura video quiz. So anywhere in my lecture that I normally would have paused and asked the student a question, I just use the video quiz to create that as close as I can to that interaction with the students. And then so far they seem to like it.
So Jeff, I've got a question for you, because this has come up a couple of times in some of these videos, and it's the terminology that we're using. You use the term synchronous, and because I believe many of the instructors, they realize that they already had the time set aside so that for the class in a face-to-face format, so they could use this time, and we use the term synchronous, but sometimes when we say online courses, the thought is asynchronous, but it can certainly be both, synchronous or asynchronous. And what you're describing is an opportunity in real time for them maybe to watch you through a video during that time slot. And have you found that you have a preference for synchronous versus asynchronous in online format, or is it just a nice blend?
It's a nice blend, and synchronous is for face-to-face instructors are what they're most used to. So, I really encourage people to start on that comfort area and then begin to expand into the other areas with the asynchronous activities. And it's kind of weird because, if you've spent years building a class, I've actually been teaching basically the same course for 14 of my 15 years. Mm-hmm. So the material, the formatting, the pacing, the content are very well established. And so I had to, break my own rhythm a little bit and give up that. And we've taken this class and we've cut the hours and we've realigned it and we've done some other stuff that every time that got proposed, every time my initial gut reaction was, I can't do this if you take away this many hours. I can't, but each time I just had to go back and reevaluate and say, where can I save times? Where can I gain from these activities? So part of this asynchronous versus asynchronous, it kind of gets into that flipping the classroom idea again. Mm-hmm. So even with my synchronous activities, even though I've technically blocked out, what would have been my normal lecture 2-hour slot. I don't want to do 2 hours of talking on Zoom with them. I want that interaction. So the first part starts with the questions that are fed from assignments that there's a video that explains it. But if I was ever really worried that a video was going to replace me as an instructor, I probably would be a little more worried than I am now, and I just don't see it happening. Same, I don't expect a book to replace me. You know, I got a little value to add to that. And so as they watch those videos and they attempt those assignments, that's when the dialogue really begins, that they have lots of questions and they're very tangible. And I could pull up the assignment using screen share and show them in Canvas. I use, you know, the on-screen annotation. I can work the problem with it, you know, and really walk them through. And then, you know, they'll turn the assignments in later and so forth. So they really get a good interaction. But the big thing is it's a group interaction. One of the things I always found is that the students who don't ask you the questions in class doesn't mean they don't have any questions. That really benefits from having people in the class who are asking the questions, you know, for them, because, you know, you got to meet the students where they're at. And so that interaction, they may not have thought about that homework assignment, or in some cases, they haven't looked at it yet. And when we pull it up and they see some of their classmates asking the question, they're like, I really need to pay attention to this. So it's a combination of using that asynchronous to get a dialogue started. It's, you know, using that flipping the classroom kind of idea, and then trying to get that as much engagement as we can.
Jeff, I have a couple of thoughts from your remarks. One of them, I really enjoy the way you say, well, when you first were given this challenge, that's kind of the way I like to see it, is we all were given this challenge, because when we have adversity, it really gives us an opportunity to innovate and create and discover. And one of the interesting things as you were talking, I was thinking about, was you said, you know, at first you were thinking, how are we going to do this? This can't be done. This isn't possible. And then you shifted your mindset to say, let me focus on what we might be able to do. And I think what's really interesting is that's exactly what we ask our students to do, irrespective of this environment. When they come to Milford, SCC, and you start telling them, I'm sure quite a few go, oh, wait a minute, I don't understand this. How am I possibly going to learn this? This is too difficult. This is complex. But then they start pushing themselves and trying things they never had attempted before. And so I like the way that we're modeling that. I think that's great. The other thing I was going to ask you, have you used breakout rooms in Zoom yet? Because I think that's something that allows you to get the students in smaller groups and can encourage those that might be a little hesitant to get out there. I don't know if that's something you use yet.
I haven't. I saw the email out about the training session on that one. And part of this, especially this beginning part, you know, being program director, people look to you in a program, especially, you know, and you're thinking that, how are we going to do this? You know, and I actually have to give props to Mike Allberg, program director for electronics, because years ago when we were looking at some stuff in electronics, we were looking at online opportunities, and, you know, he changed the narrative from, you know, how would we do this? He's like, if we're going to do this, how would we be the best at it? How would we, you know, what tools would it take to be here? And so from that, which was probably 8 years ago, you know, some of the tools, some of the work, some of the framework, setting up and looking to be beyond this point, you know, to be proactive instead of reactive, kind of helped set up there. So when people were turning to me like, what are we going to do? You know, we got that big barrage of all those training sessions on Zoom and all those other pieces. And I really, just like students, if you throw too much out there, they get drowned in that activity. So immediately I got a hold of my faculty, including the adjuncts that I have, and I really narrowed them in. And I said, okay, here's number one, you need to get this Zoom training so you're comfortable with using Zoom. Number two, you know, the next tool was kind of that Kaltura to shoot those videos and do stuff like that. And then as we move forward, we'll add in those pieces as we build up that comfort level. And that's the same thing we do when we're teaching, is we want to build to a comfort level. And then, all right, let's take you a little out of the comfort zone, a little out of the comfort zone. So we've been adding new stuff. I look back at some of my original video materials, even just, you know, from a couple weeks ago. And, you know, I got to go back and redo those. Those things are, you know, terrible and stuff like that. And then working forward. So first was working out how I was going to accomplish my theory. What were the easy things to do? What were the complicated stuff to do? How to get labs involved? And, you know, we've been working through those. You know, use of video is helping. We were able to get remote access to our lab to access software for the students. And so far, we've had a good majority of the students that haven't had any issues. We've had a few that have, and we're still working, trying to get that through, you know, trying to get them in a good place there. And it's just, go ahead.
No, that's great, Jeff. I mean, you're describing some really wonderful ways of approaching a challenging situation. And I'm very impressed with how you've really sort of thought this through. And I don't know if you've seen our most recent draft of it's actually been approved now by the board. We have a new strategic plan that will be officially launched July 1. That's our second 5-year strategic plan. We're finishing up the first one, but in the new plan, we have a vision statement that we didn't have in the past. And the purpose of that vision statement is to kind of paint a picture for where SCC is going to be in the next 5 years. And one of the sentences in that vision statement really focuses on creating a high contact, a high touch, high contact environment for the students. Because you pointed it out earlier in your remarks, you said, you know, you're not worried about being replaced by a video or by a book, and you shouldn't be, because you have something to offer that those things can't offer, and that's a relationship with the students that knows you're there to help them. That's a connection, and that's never going to go away. In fact, I think it's only going to get more important as we continue to advance in terms of technology. The other thing I thought I would sort of mention, and then I think we're going to need to wrap this up. You teach electrical, mechanical, and I've been saying that I think we're going to see some shifting in demand from our students, and I think that career and technical programs, in many ways, these are the types of programs where students will be able to have a very, very much marketable skill set, irrespective of the environment. I think they're maybe not completely pandemic proof, but they're certainly, you know, I think the needs for electrical, mechanical, and many other career technical workers is absolutely not going to change. If anything, it's just going to get stronger. I think that might be something that parents and students think about when they are making their choices where to go for higher education. I think career and technical is a wonderful option for many of our students. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, well, we always think it's the best option, but it doesn't fit everyone, and that's what, you know, having options are all about.
Sure.
But yeah, our growth potential, feeding the industry. Yeah, the kind of the interesting part is that, you know, we stay in touch with a lot of our graduates, and, you know, most of them were working in essential, you know, energy, manufacturing, you know, I mean, all sorts of places, you know, that they were called upon, you know, to be at work and so forth in this time, and work from home in their, you know, hands-on environments, you know, wasn't really practical. I mean, we've got a very large percentage of 3M maintenance support up in Valley is graduates of our program. The plant manager of the 3M Valley is a graduate of our program. And, you know, of course, they're doing their best to crank out and make as much PPE as they can. So yeah, there's a lot of growth there. Manufacturing in the U.S. is different, but it's very much here. And when they talk about those jobs going away, it was the operator who was sitting there, you know, just reaching back and pushing the button all day, you know, versus the, you know, running the computer, running the equipment, programming the system, and so forth. And that was one of the transitions, you know, that people forgot about. And the other thing that for manufacturing careers that always works against them, they build them in those giant buildings with no windows. And I was doing a recruiting event for Crete, and I brought out a little trainer, similar to the equipment you see behind me here. And, you know, I said, well, when you drive by Purina, you know, what do you think? And they're like, well, they make dog food. I said, yeah. But you ever thought about how that works out? All the equipment in there, the robotics, the automation, the conveyors. And they were just like, well, no, because the building says Purina and material comes in one side and, you know, dog food trucks leave on the other. And so it kind of became an invisible career. So yeah, there's a lot of options out there are graduates end up in jobs. I'm like, how, that doesn't even seem connected, but they find their way into repairing the weigh in motion scale systems for the interstate. That isn't one of the traditional careers we think about, but we had a graduate end up landing a company there. So,
well, you've been great, Jeff. I'm gonna probably need to wrap things up here, but you've been fantastic. It's really wonderful to see such a positive Goal 9 type approach that you've taken with your students and in your own career here at SCC. So anything else before we wrap this up?
Oh, you brought up what discussion brought my name about, and that was the idea when I wanted to create a sense of normalcy for my students. I thought about, like, how do I make them feel more comfortable, in these remote locations? So to do that, we play around with virtual backgrounds, and I said, well, what if my virtual background was the real world? And so one of the things I did before left the building is I went around and I kind of shot video or pictures of where I'd be. So this was my first one of kind of an action shot. I had our benches look totally different now. It's like we were trying to figure out about 8 years old picture. But I thought to myself, like, if I'm going to host different settings of my classroom, what would they be used to seeing? And so I decided, well, if I was up front teaching, I'd be in front of the whiteboards. So when I'm teaching my classes, I like to throw this one up, including the little spots above the board where we have to, we took down the projector screens and stuff like that. We still need to paint, but that's something the students recognize as the classroom they're normally in.
Sure.
Then I thought, well, I might as well, if I'm going to hold virtual office hours, I might as well make them comfortable in my office.
Perfect.
So I snapped a picture of my office. And then one of the things we're doing for our larger classes is we're trying to pair up another instructor to do a moderator. So that, because we've got some classes with 30 plus students in them. And so I made myself, look like I was sitting in the classroom with the students to put them in that perspective there. So it's a classroom that they're familiar with and stuff like that. So I did some little things, playing around with the idea of even though we're in a virtual environment, our goal is still, to get back and create that normalcy and get, back to where we were. So this was a way to keep a little attachment and have a little fun with it. I haven't unveiled Dinosaur of the Day yet, but as we move forward here, I may start busting out little toy dinosaurs to fight in the screen.
Sure.
I always tell my students we're going to laugh every day.
Perfect.
And work
like
that way.
I didn't see that one coming, but I think that's wonderful example of creativity, fighting stuffed dinosaurs. All right, Jeff, you've been great. Thank you for spending a little time with me this afternoon, and have a great rest of your day, everyone. And we'll go ahead and sign off this meeting. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Okay, no problem.
Take care.
You too.
Keep up with the good work.
On to the next meeting.